Have you ever had that nagging feeling that things aren't quite what they seem?
Hmm.
That maybe the news feels less about, reporting events and more like a carefully crafted script, something designed to get a specific reaction?
Oh, definitely. Or that feeling when experiences, even really personal ones, sometimes feel a bit, well, prepackaged, almost too perfect.
So, too perfect to be real.
It's a powerful perception, that feeling. And it resonates deeply with the really radical ideas of one of the 20th century's most, let's say, provocative thinkers, Jean Baudrillard.
Right.
His groundbreaking 1981 work, Simulations, it just plunges us into this world where the lines between what's real and how it's represented haven't just blurred. He argues they've collapsed entirely, gone.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our deep dive today is into Baudrillard's Simulations. And it's a book that honestly challenges everything we think we know about truth, authenticity, even
He
ourselves.
really does.
We're talking about this concept he calls hyperreality. It's a state where the copy becomes so pervasive, so powerful that it actually becomes more real than the original.
More real than the real.
Yeah. And the map, as he says, literally precedes the territory. It comes first.
Absolutely. And our mission today, really, is to extract the most potent insights from this.
Well, it's a challenging text, let's be honest, but it's incredibly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
We want to help you understand how Baudrillard's ideas illuminate our current world, from political narratives, social media identities.
Theme parks.
Oh, theme parks are a classic example, right down to our most intimate personal experiences.
So get ready for some major aha moments, hopefully. Because this isn't just abstract philosophy, it's a powerful lens, a way to view your everyday life and maybe make sense of some of its most confusing aspects.
Exactly. It's a toolkit for decoding the present.
The procession of simulacra, when the mat comes first. Okay, so let's kick off our journey into Baudrillard's thought with what he really identifies as the core shift in how we relate to reality. He calls it the procession of simulacra.
Right.
And that's not just a catchy phrase, is it? It's like the fundamental premise his whole argument is built on.
It absolutely is. It's the foundation. And he introduces it so brilliantly by flipping a classic literary fable by Jorge Luis Borges completely on its head.
Ah, the Borges map story. I remember that one. The cartographers who were obsessed with detail.
That's the one.
Yeah.
They drew a map so incredibly detailed, so precise. It ended up covering the entire territory of their empire, like literally draped over it.
Which is just absurd when you think about it.
Totally absurd. And of course, over time, the map frayed, decomposed, and eventually left only these tattered shreds scattered across the desert landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Baudrillard saw that fable as embodying what he called the discrete charm of second-order simulacra.
Okay, second order. What does that mean here?
It means it was a world where the map, no matter how ridiculously detailed, was still fundamentally trying to represent an existing, tangible territory. There was still a clear difference, what he called a sovereign difference, between the real thing and its representation.
Got it. So the map was still secondary to the reality, a reflection.
Exactly. Even an absurdly large reflection, but still a reflection. But Baudrillard's radical twist for our contemporary age, he completely flips that dynamic.
This is the core, right?
This is the absolute core. He says it is the map that precedes the territory procession of simulacra. It is the map that engenders the territory.
Wow. Engenders the territory. Creates it.
And if we were to revive the fable today, it would be the territory whose shreds are slowly rotting across the map.
Whoa. So the reality is what's fading away now.
Precisely. It is the real and not the map whose vestiges subsist here and there in the deserts which are no longer those of the empire but our own. The desert of the real itself.
The desert of the real. That's such a powerful image.
It is. What Baudrillard is articulating here is this profound fundamental reversal. We're not in a world where representations just reflect reality anymore.
No.
Instead, the models, the signs, the simulations, they actively create and define what we understand as reality.
Can you give an example? Like, how does that work in practice?
Okay, think about planning a vacation. You see these stunning Instagram photos, right? Professional travel blogs, perfectly curated tourist video.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So has that imagined experience, the map you've built in your head from those images, now shaped your expectation of the actual place so intensely?
That the real place might feel like a letdown.
Yeah.
Or just less real than the pictures.
Exactly. The physical reality itself might feel like a faded, imperfect copy. The territory, in a way, becomes secondary. It's just there to sort of confirm the map you already had.
Okay. That makes sense. And this leads us straight to that core concept. the hyperreal.
The hyperreal.
It's a reality, Baudrillard explains, that's generated by models of a real without origin or reality. Let's break that down.
Right, without origin or reality. It's crucial.
It's not just a fake or a deception, right? It's more than that.
Much more. It's a meticulously reproduced world that doesn't need a real counterpart anymore because it operates entirely on its own logic. It often feels more authentic, more compelling than what we used to call real.
That sovereign difference you mentioned between the real and its representation.
Gone. Vanished.
Yeah.
Baudrillard says that clear, original mirror of being and appearances just doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
Precisely. And Baudrillard highlights that we've moved way beyond simple imitation or even parody. The hyperreal is about substituting signs of the real for the real itself.
Substituting the signs.
Yeah. He describes it as an operation to deter every real process by its operational double, like a perfect simulation that stops the messy, unpredictable real thing from happening.
A metastable, programmatic, perfect, descriptive machine.
Which provides all the signs of the real and short-circuits all its vicissitudes. It basically creates this perfect, self-sustaining system of signs that just replaces messy, unpredictable reality.
Okay, like maybe an incredibly realistic AI influencer, someone who lives entirely online.
That's a great contemporary example. They aren't imitating a real person. They are the real within that digital space. Their existence completely bypasses all the, complications and flaws of an actual human life.
Right. No messy bits.
No messy bits. In the hyperreal, the model takes precedence. It creates a world sheltered from the imaginary and from any distinction between the real and the imaginary. Even the idea of something being truly imaginary dissolves because everything just becomes a variation of these existing hyperreal models.
That's a really powerful point. Now, to help us grasp this profound and, let's be honest, pretty unsettling shift, Baudrillard draws this critical distinction between two concepts, dissimulation and simulation.
Yes, this is key to understanding the threat he sees.
So to dissimulate, that's like pretending not to have something you actually possess.
Exactly. His example is simple. Someone pretending they're not ill when they actually are.
Okay. So when you dissimulate, the basic reality principle is still there, right? The truth is just masked, hidden. You know you're hiding something.
The reality principle is intact. But to simulate, Baudrillard warns, is to feign to have what one hasn't. And this is where the real danger lies for him.
Feigning to have what you haven't. Okay.
He uses Lattre's definition. Someone feigning illness might just go to bed and act sick. But someone simulating illness produces in himself some of the symptoms.
Like psychosomatic symptoms where your mind actually makes your body produce physical signs.
Exactly like that. The body produces these manifestations. So it feels real to the person, maybe even to doctors, even if there's no traditional physical cause. And this threatens the very difference between true and false, real and imaginary.
Because if the symptoms can be produced, if their origin is murky,
then medicine and psychology really struggle, don't they? If any symptom can potentially be produced and you can't trust it as a definitive fact of nature, then maybe every illness could be simulated. Objective diagnosis becomes incredibly difficult.
And this blurring, he says, extends even to serious contexts, like the military.
Yes. Traditionally, the military would work hard to unmask simulators, someone faking an injury to get out of combat, for instance. They'd be punished.
Right.
But Baudrillard flips it. He argues if someone acts crazy so well, then he must be mad. The perfect simulation of madness, for him, becomes indistinguishable from madness itself.
So the act becomes the reality.
In effect, yes. This blurring, this lack of distinction between the authentic symptom and the produced one is what Baudrillard sees as the worst form of subversion against classical reason.
Why classical reason specifically?
Because classical reason depended on clear categories, didn't it? Distinct boundaries, a belief in objective, observable truth. Simulation just obliterates those distinctions at its core.
Okay. Wow.
Absolutely. And this is where Baudrillard really pushes us to think. If these fundamental boundaries, true, false, real, imaginary, can be so easily dissolved, what does that actually mean for our ability to grasp objective reality in any area? Where do you, listening now, see these distinctions blurring today? Think about those carefully curated social media identities. Are they fake? Not necessarily, but they're often a hyper-real version of the self, right?
Definitely polished, filtered.
Or political narratives that seem to prioritize emotional impact, maybe even manufactured outrage, over verifiable facts.
It's everywhere.
It forces us to confront this really unsettling idea. Maybe what we perceive as real is just a highly effective, deeply ingrained simulation, one that doesn't even have an original blueprint anymore.
The divine irreverence of images and the orders of simulacra.
Okay, so let's continue this deep dive by tracing Baudrillard's ideas about images and their power. He takes it way back, right, to the earliest human fears about representation.
He does. He argues that the origin of this deep-seated fear of simulation can actually be found in religion, specifically in what he calls the simulacrum of divinity.
The simulacrum of divinity, meaning like images of God.
Exactly. He asks, why did so many ancient traditions strictly forbid making images of God?
Yeah, the iconoclasts, the image breakers.
Right. But Baudrillard's take is fascinating. He says the iconoclasts weren't simply despising images. They actually accorded them their actual worth. They understood their power.
So their rage to destroy images wasn't just about disrespect.
No, he argues it came from a profound understanding, maybe even a terror, of the omnipotence of simulacra, their terrifying ability to potentially efface God from consciousness itself.
Wow, so the fear was that the image could replace God?
Or worse, that the images wouldn't just distort or misrepresent God, but actually suggest that ultimately there has never been any God, that only the simulacrum exists.
Whoa.
Indeed, that God himself has only ever been his own simulacrum.
So the fear wasn't a distorted truth, but that the images concealed nothing at all, that there was no divine depth behind them.
Precisely. That chilling realization that there might be no original divine referential to find, and that for them threatened the very foundation of reality and had to be violently exorcised.
Okay, so what about the other side? The iconolators, the ones who defended images.
Yeah.
He mentions the Jesuits.
Yes, and in stark contrast, Baudrillard sees them as the most modern and adventurous minds of their era.
Modern how?
Because they weren't afraid of images. Perhaps, he suggests, they intuitively understood the virtual disappearance of God as that fixed, transcendent reference point.
Ah, okay.
So instead, they built their politics on the worldly and spectacular manipulation of consciences. It was, as he puts it, an evanescence of God in the epiphany of power.
The display of power became the reality, rather than pointing to God.
Exactly. The image, the spectacle, the manipulation of signs itself became the new locus of truth and power. Truth shifted from something deep and absolute to something surface level, spectacular, and well managed.
Okay, and this leads to what he calls the murderous capacity of images.
Yes, they can, in essence, murder the real. They can murder their own model.
How?
Well, think about Western faith for centuries. It hinged on signs referring to a depth of meaning, right? A profound reality guaranteed by God.
Mm-hmm.
But if God himself can be simulated, if divinity can be reduced to the signs which attest his existence, then the whole system loses its anchor. It becomes weightless, Baudrillard says. It is no longer anything but a gigantic simulacrum.
Not unreal like fake, but self-contained.
Exactly. A system that only exchanges with itself, an uninterrupted circuit without reference or circumference. This, for Baudrillard, is simulation, and it's fundamentally opposed to representation.
Because representation always assumed a link, right? Between the sign and the real thing.
It assumed an equivalence, a connection. Simulation, though, negates the sign as a true value or an accurate reference. It just is. It operates on its own.
Okay, so to illustrate this shift, this descent into simulation, he outlines 4 phases of the image.
Yes, 4 successive escalating phases showing how the image's relationship to reality degrades into pure simulacrum.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, it is the reflection of a basic reality. Think of a sacrament, like communion. The bread and wine are believed to directly reflect a divine reality. The image points clearly to an underlying truth.
Got it. Phase 2.
Second, it masks and perverts a basic reality. This is like a malefice, a harmful spell perhaps. The image or ritual distorts or hides an existing truth, maybe to deceive or manipulate. The truth is still there, just hidden or twisted.
Okay, makes sense. Third.
Third, it masks the absence of a basic reality. This is more like sorcery. The image or sign pretends there's a reality, a deep meaning behind it, but actually there isn't one to mask. It's conjuring an illusion where nothing fundamental exists.
Right. Creating something from nothing, essentially.
In terms of reference, yes.
Yeah.
And finally, the 4th phase, the most unsettling one.
The end point.
The end point. It bears no relation to any reality whatever. It is its own pure simulacrum. In this phase, the image exists entirely on its own terms. It's completely self-referential, a copy without an original.
Wow, so that's the full trajectory.
That's the trajectory. And that transition, he says, from signs which dissimulate something to signs which dissimulate that there is nothing, marks a decisive, irreversible turning point.
Why reversible?
Because the first two phases still operate within what he calls a theology of truth and secrecy. Ideology plays a role, masking or distorting, but there's still a belief that a discoverable truth exists.
Right.
But the third and fourth phases, he argues, they inaugurate an age of simulacra and stimulation.
In which there is no longer any God to recognize his own, nor any last judgment to separate true from false, the real from its artificial resurrection, since everything is already dead and risen in advance.
Exactly. What he means is we're left with this proliferation of secondhand truths, objective-seeming facts, the appearance of authenticity, all artificially produced and validated within the system itself, not by any external objective standard.
Okay, so if that's the theory, how does this play out historically? He talks about 3 orders of appearance, right?
Yeah.
Tied to value and simulacra.
Yes, this gives us a kind of historical roadmap for how we got to this hyper-real present. 3 orders.
Let's start with the first order.
The first order is counterfeit. He places this roughly from the Renaissance up to the Industrial Revolution. This era operated on what he calls a natural law of value. Value was tied to things being unique, maybe handmade, or having direct social significance based on tradition or nature.
Like craftsmanship or noble birthright, maybe.
Precisely. But with the breakdown of rigid feudal society, signs like coats of arms, clothing styles became emancipated from fixed social status. This led to open competition on the level of the distinctive signs.
So anyone can start copying signs of status.
Essentially, yes. And this is exactly where counterfeit thrived, because the unique, obliged sign of feudalism, the one that clearly marked your place, was replaced by a proliferation of signs according to demand.
So the original sign lost its clarity, its inherent value, because it was copied everywhere.
Exactly. Think of a master craftsman's unique piece being endlessly replicated by apprentices. The originality starts to blur, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. He uses Baroque art as an example, right? With stucco.
Yes. Baroque art and architecture, especially the use of stucco, which could imitate everything luxurious: velvet, marble, even human flesh. This wasn't just decoration, Baudrillard argues. He saw it as a kind of worldly demiurge, a transubstantiation of all of nature into a unique substance, all very theatrical, reflecting social life being unified under emerging bourgeois values. It was this urge to imitate and recreate nature before society fully embraced industrial production.
And he connects this to the Jesuits, too.
Powerfully. Their huge goal was to reunify a fractured world under one homogeneous doctrine after the Reformation. And they created these effective simulacra to do it.
Through what? Their organization.
Their elaborate organization, yes. Their magnificent clerical displays, their architecture, even their highly structured education system, which aimed to basically remodel an ideal nature from a child.
Right, like creating the perfect obedient subject.
Exactly. Mirrored this desire for a universal, synthetic, perfectly controlled social substance. It's all about imposing form.
He gives that really strange example, too. Camille Renaud, the cook.
Oh, the Ardennes cook. It's a fantastic, bizarre illustration. This guy literally constructed an entire world out of reinforced concrete.
Concrete furniture.
Concrete furniture, a concrete orchestra, even concrete trees with real leaves stuck on them, and a concrete hog with a real hog skull inside.
That's deeply weird.
It is. But Baudrillard says he wasn't parodying reality. He was remaking it only to render it more intelligible. Striving for this control of a pacified society ground up into a synthetic, deathless substance. An indestructible artifact to guarantee eternal power. It perfectly shows that desire for an ideal counterfeit of the world even before mass production took over.
Okay, that's the first order. Counterfeit. What's the second?
The second order is production. This is the industrial era, and it's governed by the commercial law of value.
So value shifts from uniqueness to mass production. Exchange.
Exactly. Reproducibility and exchange become key. And the defining technological shift here is from the automaton to the robot.
Automaton versus robot. Okay.
The automaton, like those amazing mechanical figures from the 18th century, the chess player, the writer.
Yeah, those are incredible.
They were theatrical counterfeits. They still interrogated nature, didn't they? They posed questions about the soul, human ingenuity, the difference between appearance and being. They were fascinating because they seemed almost human, that ideal double.
Right. But the robot?
The robot, Baudrillard argues, has no such thing. It doesn't interrogate appearance or existence. Its truth is purely in its mechanical efficacy.
It just works.
It just works. It doesn't resemble man as an ideal double. Instead, it becomes man's equivalent and annexes him to itself in the unity of its operational process.
So humans become part of the machine's process.
In a sense, yes. This order is defined by indefinite reproducibility, equivalence, indifference. Objects in a series become undefined simulacra, one of the other, identical, interchangeable.
And he says, unsettlingly, so do the people who produce them.
Yes, defined by their serial function within the industrial machine. The copy isn't special anymore, it's just the norm. Uniqueness is lost to the series.
This sounds like where Walter Benjamin comes in. His essay on art and mechanical reproduction.
Absolutely crucial. Benjamin showed how mechanical reproduction, especially film and photography, changed everything. It absorbed the production process into the art itself.
Right.
And McLuhan expanded on this, didn't he? Seeing technique not as a productive force, but as medium, as the form and principle of a whole new way of sensing the world.
The medium is the message.
Exactly. The true message, the true ultimatum, was in reproduction itself, production's original social purpose, its meaning. Baudrillard says it got lost in the series. Benjamin's example of the African native seeing two identical books for the first time, that shock highlights the revolutionary impact of just reproducibility itself.
But Baudrillard says even this stage, the second order, is ephemeral. It doesn't last.
No, it yields to the next stage, which he argues is our current phase, the third order, simulation.
This final stage?
The final stage for him. This period is controlled by the code, based on a structural law of value.
The code, like digital code, binary.
Fundamentally, yes. Here, forms aren't just mechanically reproduced. They're actually conceived from the very beginning based on their potential for reproducibility. They're diffracted from a generating nucleus we call the model.
So the model comes first, and everything else is just a variation.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is Baudrillard's assertion that industrial production itself, the second order, was merely the final manifestation of this deeper principle of simulation that was always emerging.
Wow. So it's all about the underlying blueprint, the code, from which endless variations can be generated.
Exactly. This is where Benjamin and McLuhan were so prophetic. They saw the message was in the act of reproduction, and that the original meaning got lost in the series, leading directly, Baudrillard argues, to the dominance of the digital code.
A hyper-real and the code in action.
Okay, so this brings us right into Baudrillard's vision of our current era, dominated by what he calls the metaphysic of the code.
The code rules everything.
And it's not just a metaphor for him, is it? He sees it as a universe profoundly governed by structures and binary oppositions, zeros and ones.
He really does. He even brings in the philosopher Leibniz, who had this idea that the binary system 0 and 1 was the very image of creation itself, like God operating on nothingness with binary logic to create everything.
That sets a pretty profound stage for a world reduced to digital components.
It absolutely does. And for Baudrillard, the ultimate prophet of this new coded age is DNA.
DNA, the genetic code.
Yes, the genetic code is where the genesis of simulacra, he says, finds its most accomplished form. At this molecular level, the signs are illegible. They're like programmatic matrices, black boxes just radiating signals.
So the whole idea of representation of theater is over.
Completely over. There's no room for symbolic conflict, for silence, for real depth anymore. Instead, Baudrillard describes this constant stream of signifying radiations. We're being tested continuously by our own program inscribed in the cells.
Tested by our own DNA.
It suggests our very being is dictated by this internal, unchangeable script, a constant repetition within the cell.
That's incredibly chilling when you think about free will.
There really is.
If our program is inscribed in the cells, with choices already made by whom, as he asks, and answers genetically unchangeable, what does that leave for our autonomy?
It paints a picture of this cellular space generating the same signals over and over, like the ticks of a prisoner gone crazy with solitude and repetition, he says. All sense of unique meaning just dissolves into this inscription and decoding.
He brings in Jacques Monod's book here, right? Chance and Necessity.
Yes, that's a key reference. Monod talks about the discontinuous indeterminism of the genetic code controlling life, where the end goal, the finality, is already inscribed in the code.
Okay.
Baudrillard takes this concept and runs with it. He suggests this fantasy of the code is directly equivalent to the reality of power in our society today. It leads to an ideal of a social order ruled by a sort of genetic code of macromolecular calculation, a code that radiates throughout the whole social body, managing everything like a giant planning system.
So social control shifts from, like, ideology or force to programming, simulation.
Exactly. Control based on anticipation, simulation, programmed mutations. It's a system that doesn't just react, it pre-adapts, it pre-produces outcomes.
And this is the big mutation he identifies, from capitalism and production to what?
To a neo-capitalist cybernetic order that aims now at total control.
Total control.
Total control. He argues the system, through its endless reproduction, just liquidates its own myths of origin, myths of ending. It even neutralizes the idea of revolution.
Wow.
It becomes this interminable machine operating without discourse. There's no space left for genuine debate, opposition, or planned change. It just runs. And that, for Baudrillard, is its true insidious violence. It's a self-perpetuating loop that's consumed its own past and future.
Wow. He even critiques science itself within this, doesn't he?
He does. He looks at Monod's claim that science is only a priori, is the postulate of objectivity, that science just observes and reports, forbidding itself from taking sides.
Which sounds reasonable on the surface.
Right. But Baudrillard counters that this is a never innocent decision for objectification of the world.
Meaning?
He suggests that while science uses a conventional logic, it needs an objective real reference to justify itself, which actually perpetuates a kind of metaphysical illusion. This conventional basis lets science act as a generating formula, a model discourse that ultimately reinforces this total reduction of reality to its own coded terms.
So science, by claiming pure objectivity, kind of becomes part of the code's operating system.
That's a good way to put it. It reinforces the simulation by defining the terms of reality.
Okay. And this chilling regulation by the code, it's not just in labs or theories. He says it permeates our banal everyday life.
Absolutely. Through the test of the question answer, of the stimulus response. Think about it. Our experience of almost all content, news, entertainment, online interactions is constantly neutralized by this continual procedure of directed interrogation.
Like everything's a quiz.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Baudrillard asserts every sign, every message is presented to us as question-answer.
Okay, this feels like it's getting really close to home now.
It is. He states, we live by the mode of referendum precisely because there is no longer any referential.
Because there's no external reality to point to, everything becomes a poll.
Exactly. Every sign, every message, every product, every news item is packaged as a question-answer prompt. Referenda, polls, surveys, he calls them, perfect forms of simulation.
Not perfect.
Because the answer is called forth by the question. It is designated in advance. The options are limited, the range of acceptable answers is predefined. Your participation just feeds into a predetermined outcome. He says every message is like a verdict, like polling stats, where the whole cycle of meaning is infinitely shortened into that of question-answer.
This connects back to Benjamin's idea about the film actor, doesn't it? Being subjected to tests by the camera.
Perfectly. Benjamin saw the camera subjecting the performance to optical tests, dissecting it. The audience, lacking direct contact, then takes the position of the camera. Its approach is that of testing.
We're always evaluating, selecting.
Constantly, like vocational aptitude tests, reducing complex people to segmental performances. Baudrillard even links it to Dadaist art or early film, which he felt had this tactile quality, fragmenting perception, demanding instant yes or no responses.
So we're not just viewers or users anymore.
No, we are readers and selectors, reading cells, constantly being tested, constantly providing data that confirms the system's operation.
And McLuhan's "the medium is the message" gets even darker here.
Much darker. The medium itself, with its editing, its framing, its style of montage, of decoupage, of interpolation, controls the whole process of meaning.
And he says, by the same token, you also are constantly selected and tested by the medium itself.
Yeah. The medium isn't passive. It's intangible, diffuse, and diffracted in the real. It's not just distorting reality from outside, it's acting like that genetic code which controls the mutation of the real into the hyperreal.
Wow, so it's not like we're invaded by media, but more like Infiltrated.
Infiltrated by its illegible violence, as he puts it. A violence that makes distinctions like cause-effect, active-passive, subject-object just collapse.
So where does this leave something fundamental, like public opinion? Is it real?
Baudrillard argues it's the prettiest of these samples. Not a real organic political substance, but a hyper-real one. It lives only off of montage and test manipulation.
Generated by the polls themselves.
Yes. That binary scheme of question-answer that dominates our digital and political world, it renders inarticulate every discourse. It is chillingly the end of real interrogation. The whole political sphere, he says, entirely loses its specificity when it enters into the game of the media and public opinion polls. It just blurs to this continuous, controlled polling exercise.
He even calls universal suffrage the first of the mass media.
He does, paradoxically, because it reduces complex social exchange to a simple binary answer, yes or no.
And polls just refer to a simulacrum of public opinion.
A mirror of opinion, where, and this is key, it is no longer necessary that anyone produce an opinion. All that is needed is that all reproduce public opinion.
A feedback loop.
A perfect feedback loop. Individual thought gets absorbed into this pre-existing public consensus. He vividly calls it the progressive leucemization of all social substance.
Leucemization, like white blood cells taking over.
Yeah, where the vibrant blood of real societal interaction is replaced by the white lymph of media, this sterile uniform fluid. The genuine word of the people being polled, the citizens, is irremediably short-circuited and lost.
Because they always pretend to be as the question imagines and solicits them to be.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. He even extends this to psychoanalysis, suggesting it becomes interminable because it starts producing the unconscious on demand rather than discovering it.
Libidinal hyperrealism. Wow.
Even desire becomes non-referential, feeding off its own reflection.
It's fascinating how he sees this playing out in global power, too. He talks about advanced democratic systems stabilizing through bipartite alternation, like the two-party system.
Exactly. Not through genuine opposition, but through this endless dance between two dominant parties or two superpowers in the Cold War context. Power, he argues, actually becomes absolute if it can diffract into various equivalents.
So the appearance of opposition actually reinforces the system.
That's his controversial point. He even says you need two superpowers to keep the universe under control. A single empire would crumble of itself. The opposition, the conflict, becomes part of the stability mechanism, not a threat.
The illusion of choice maintains control.
Precisely. And he uses that striking architectural example. The World Trade Center towers in New York.
The Twin Towers, how did they fit in?
Unlike older skyscrapers that competed vertically, always trying to be the tallest, the most unique symbol.
Right, like the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building.
Exactly. The twin WTC towers, being perfectly balanced, identical, almost blind mirrors of each other, signified for him the end of all competition, the end of all original reference.
Their duplication destroys its meaning.
Yes. There's no distinct original anymore, no drive for individual supremacy. It mirrors Andy Warhol's multiple Marilyn Monroe prints.
Ah, the Marilyns. How does that connect?
Baudrillard argues Warhol's Marilyns demonstrate the death of the original and the end of representation. The very essence of what Marilyn represented, unique star quality, singular beauty, is dissolved through endless, identical reproduction.
The uniqueness is lost in the repetition.
Completely. The WTC towers, like Warhol's Marilyns, embody this triumph of the strategy of models and commutations over old-style competition. It marked the closure of the system in a vertigo of duplication.
The spectacle of hyperreality, when everything becomes a performance.
Okay, so now our journey takes us to how Baudrillard sees this simulation culminating in these huge societal phenomena, especially around conflict and control. He starts with the nuclear arms race and the space race.
Yeah. Yes, he sees the nuclear system, particularly the Cold War's balance of terror, as the absolute apotheosis of simulation, the peak.
But wasn't that about avoiding war through mutual destruction? Emma D.
On the surface, yes. But Baudrillard argues it wasn't really about avoiding conflict in that way. It was about creating a system of deterrence that subtly, almost invisibly, leukemizes us, turning life itself into this state of constant survival, perpetual, low-grade anxiety.
Leukemizes, that word again, like it drains the lifeblood out of things.
Exactly. This deterrence, for him, inherently excludes actual war. It represents this neutral, implosive violence of metastable or involving systems. There's no clear enemy or subject anymore, just this planetary structure of the annihilation of stakes.
So the risk of nuclear war was used to justify something else.
Yes, a pretext for the installation of a universal system of security, link-up, and control. A system designed to neutralize any real event, anything unpredictable that could possibly disturb the balance.
So the balance of terror is the terror of balance.
Precisely. It's this vast global kill money, he says, circulating in a nuclear orbit, controlling all potential conflict without the messy reality of actual production or actual killing.
It's chillingly efficient when you put it like that.
He calls it the perfection of the best system of control which has never existed. It leads to the progressive satellization of the whole planet by that hypermodel of security.
The satellization.
Right.
Like everything becomes a satellite orbiting this central control system.
Yes, and this pacification, this freezing of conflict, extends even to things like civilian nuclear power plants. The idea of security becomes absolute, replacing older forms of law or violence. All conflict is essentially frozen into this social desert, a state of non-action where nothing truly surprising is allowed to happen.
Okay, and the space race. Did that play a similar role?
A remarkably similar role in his analysis. It wasn't primarily about genuine exploration or discovery.
No. What was it about then?
It was about instituting a model of universal gravitation, of satellization for human society itself. The lunar module, for instance, he describes as a programmed microcosm. Yeah, where nothing can be left to contingency. A perfect, sterile environment, a universe purged of every threat to the senses, in a state of asepsis and weightlessness.
So the public fascination wasn't just the moon landing, but the perfection of it, the flawless execution.
Exactly. The perfection of their planning and technical manipulation, the flawless execution of a pre-programmed event, that was the real spectacle.
So what's the big takeaway from this? Technology becomes the model for society.
Baudrillard suggests exactly that. The meticulous operation of technology serves as a model for the meticulous operation of the social. Our planet itself becomes a satellite in this framework, eccentric, hyperreal, and insignificant.
Trapped between the nuclear code and the genetic code.
Yes. Caught in the system where every principle of meaning is absorbed, every deployment of the real is impossible. He points to things happening around the same time, like the U.S.-Soviet space link-up in '75, and China simplifying its character writing.
Seemingly unrelated things.
But he sees them as signs of this pervasive satellization and homogenization, where unique, complex forms get systematically reabsorbed into an abstract, universal model system.
Okay. Taking this even further, he makes some really controversial arguments about war itself, right? Saying events on the ground no longer make any sense.
Extremely controversial. He argues they're nothing more than a duplex effect of simulation at the summit. He uses the Vietnam War as a prime example.
How so? He claims it vanished overnight as if by magic.
He does. He points out that despite being seen as a major military defeat for the U.S., it had surprisingly few significant internal repercussions or lasting social upheaval within America itself, which suggests to him that a deeper, more abstract game was being played.
What game? What was the real objective, according to him?
His unsettling argument is that the U.S. effectively won the war by achieving a much larger unspoken goal: securing and concretizing of China's non-intervention, shifting global geopolitics away from potential world revolution towards stable sharing of forces and empires between the major powers.
So the war ended when the unpredictable elements were gone.
That's his reading. When the unliquidated elements, meaning those pre-capitalist tribal structures or truly unpredictable revolutionary forces, were removed, and when the Vietnamese proved they could establish a rational, modern order, even a communist one, and wouldn't be bearers of an unpredictable subversion.
So the war wasn't about ideology, but about establishing global stability and control.
That's the chilling implication in Baudrillard's framework. He says, behind the simulacrum of a struggle to death, the two adversaries are fundamentally as one against anything outside that modern rationalized system like tribal, communal, pre-capitalist structures.
So war becomes a tool for rationalization.
A medium of this process of terrorist rationalization by the social, yes. A murder through which sociality can be founded. Even the heavy bombing of Hanoi, he controversially suggests, was only a simulacrum. A kind of theatrical element needed for the final montage to allow a political compromise.
Okay, let's be clear. This perspective doesn't make war less horrific or excuse the suffering, does it?
Not at all. It doesn't diminish the heinousness one bit, but it fundamentally changes its meaning within Baudrillard's thought. What no longer exists, he claims, is the adversity of adversaries, the reality of antagonistic causes, the ideological seriousness of war, also the reality of defeat or victory.
So it's just Pacification, managed stability.
Pacification dominates, yes. Beyond traditional war and peace, it's like Orwell said. War is peace. An implosion of poles, a simultaneity of contradictions where opposing forces just cancel each other out into stasis.
And he suggests other crises, like the oil crisis, might have been manufactured too.
He floats that idea, yes, that maybe they never began, never existed, except that artificial mishaps, abstracts, ersatz of troubles, catastrophes, and crises intended to maintain a historical and psychological investment under hypnosis. The newsreel of the present becomes just kish, retro, and porno, a spectacle.
The reality of simulation is unendurable, he warns.
It is. And paradoxically, he argues that nuclear proliferation doesn't actually increase the likelihood of war.
How can that be?
Because it exports the virus of deterrence. As more nations get the bomb, the possession itself removes the inclination for violent intervention. Joining the atomic club means accepting responsibility, control, self-deterrence.
So the power freezes itself.
Energies freeze by their own firepower, deterring themselves, creating this terrifying yet stable global deadlock.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. A landmark example for him of this hyper-reality penetrating everyday life was that TV experiment, The Loud Family.
Ah, yes. The 1971 American TV verite experiment, a huge deal at the time.
They filmed them constantly, for months.
7 months of continuous filming, 300 hours of raw footage, broadcasting their family life without script or scenario, presented as this totally raw historical document, capturing life exactly as it unfolded.
But the producer claimed they lived as if we weren't there.
Which Baudrillard calls a utopian and completely paradoxical formula for reality TV, because how could they?
Right, the camera changes everything.
Exactly. But he argues what truly captivated viewers wasn't just the drama, it was a thrill of the real, or of an aesthetics of the hyperreal, a thrill of vertiginous and phony exactitude.
Phony exactitude.
Yeah. The Loud family, just by being chosen, became hyperreal. An ideal heroine of the American way of life selected for this sacrificial spectacle. Baudrillard has this chilling line about how the fire from heaven doesn't need to strike down cities anymore. Now it's the TV lens that cuts through reality, putting it to death by turning it into spectacle.
So TV itself becomes the Loud's truth.
That's his point. It's not the old reflexive truth of the mirror anymore, just reflecting reality back. And it's not the perspective truth of the panoptic system either. You know, Foucault's idea of power watching from a central tower.
Right. So what kind of truth is it?
It's the manipulative truth of the test, which probes and interrogates. It operates more like a laser scan or a computer card being read, constantly scanning, testing, validating.
And this marks the end of the panoptic system.
For Baudrillard, yes, the ideal of control isn't transparent surveillance from outside anymore.
So TV isn't watching them in the traditional sense.
No, it's much more insidious. It's a system of deterrence where the distinction between active and passive is abolished. The new slogan becomes, "You are the model, you are the majority."
Meaning the real and the model get confused. We become the data points confirming the model.
Precisely. There's no localized power or medium anymore. It's everywhere, dissolved into the fabric of life.
And McLuhan's "the medium is the message" gets even more disturbing.
Even more so. The medium is intangible, diffuse, and diffracted in the real. It's not just distorting from outside. It's acting like that genetic code which controls the mutation of the real into the hyperreal.
So we're not invaded, but infiltrated.
Yeah.
By this illegible violence.
That's the idea. A violence that makes distinctions like cause-effect, active-passive, subject-object just completely collapse.
Leading to an implosion of meaning.
An implosion of meaning. We enter this realm of absolute manipulation where the family watching TV is no more or less active or passive than, say, a living cell is relative to its molecular code. It's just an indecipherable nebula where truth is ultimately unknowable because it's dissolved into the system itself.
Okay, this collapse of reality into hyperrealism. He sees it most vividly in art, doesn't he?
Profoundly, yes. Particularly through the minute duplication of the real, often using other media like advertising or photography as the source material.
So art starts copying copies.
Exactly. And the real, in this context, becomes an allegory of death. Yet, paradoxically, it's reinforced by its very destruction. It becomes the real for the real fetish of the lost object. It's no longer about representation, but this kind of ecstasy of denegation.
He says traditional realism hinted at this, but hyperrealism goes further.
Much further, actively effacing the contradiction between the real and the imaginary, The unreal isn't fantasy anymore. It's a hallucinatory resemblance of the real with itself.
Like the new novel trying to achieve pure objectivity.
Yes, that rage for eliding sense in a minute and blind reality. Trying to reach a pure objectivity that Baudrillard argues is actually just the pure look. Objectivity at last liberated from the object itself, just the surface, endlessly reflecting.
It's incredible to think about this with Warhol again, those Marilyn multiples.
They're the perfect example for him.
It's unsettling how they strip away her uniqueness. Baudrillard says this shows the death of the original and the end of representation.
Yes. It's a subtle way of murdering the original, replacing it with infinite diffraction into itself. One Marilyn's beauty is immediately canceled out by the next identical one. It traps the gaze, eliminates hierarchy. What's left is just the endless reproduction.
So let's really unpack this. The definition of the real becomes what?
It becomes that of which it is possible to give an equivalent reproduction. If you can copy it perfectly, it's real.
Okay.
And critically, the hyperreal is that which is always already reproduced.
Always already reproduced.
Yes, it aligns perfectly with a science based on reproducible processes and an industrial logic of universal equivalence. No original, just an endless stream of copies generated from a model.
And his ultimate conclusion here is maybe the most unsettling reality itself today that is hyper-realist.
That's the end point. The old saying, truth is stranger than fiction, is, for him, totally obsolete. Because there is no more fiction that life could possibly confront. It is reality itself that disappears utterly in the game of reality.
Right.
We're not experiencing tangible reality anymore, but living in an aesthetic hallucination of reality.
Wow.
Where even the most banal things get lifted to cosmic value just by being part of this perfect simulation.
There's a euphoria of simulation, he says.
Yes, where cause and effect, beginning and end, just get abolished, replaced by this circular reduplication. Old critiques, like it's just a circus, are obsolete.
Because the whole world is the circus.
An entire world is the circus. We're in the satellization of the real, where even mundane objects like a two-rooms kitchen shower could be launched into orbit and gain cosmic significance just by being part of the spectacle.
It gives that shocking example of pilots seeing themselves die.
Seeing themselves die live on their own camera. A horrifying short-circuiting of reality by its own simulacrum. The recording becomes as real, maybe more real, than the event.
And art anticipated all this.
For a long time, yes. It turned to manipulation of the signs of art, to indefinite reproduction. And production itself, industry, lost its social purpose and became abstract and non-figurative, taking on the value of a finality without purpose.
So art and industry just exchange signs in this landscape.
They do. Art becomes a reproducing machine. Industry becomes about prestigious hyperbolic signs rather than use value.
So what does this mean for art itself? Is it dead?
Baudrillard's ultimate provocative insight is basically yes. Art is everywhere, since artifice is at the very heart of reality. And so art is dead.
Why?
Not only because its critical transcendence is gone, but because reality itself, entirely impregnated by an aesthetic which is inseparable from its own structure, has been confused with its own image.
Wow. We're just caught in this schizophrenic vertigo of these serial signs.
A dizzying state where no counterfeit, no sublimation is possible. Simulation, he warns, actually pushes us close to the sphere of psychosis. The cool universe of digitality has absorbed the world of metaphor and metonymy, those rich ways we used to make meaning.
And ultimately,
he concludes, the principle of simulation wins out over the reality principle, just as over the principle of pleasure.
wow. Okay. From humble stucco imitating velvet, all the way to the blinding indifferent perfection of the World Trade Center towers. From a perfectly simulated illness to the global balance of terror. Baudrillard takes us on this really profound, if disturbing, journey through how representation has evolved, landing us right in our present hyper-real landscape.
He fundamentally challenges everything we take for granted, doesn't he? Our ideas about truth, authenticity, power, what we thought was objective reality, that clear reference point. He argues it's just dissolved, replaced by this dazzling self-referential system of signs where the copy actually generates the original.
Yeah. We've explored how the medium is the message takes on this meaning that the medium is the reality now. How our own reality is constantly being tested, reproduced through digital codes, through these question-answer prompts, and how even huge conflicts can be read as a kind of scenodrama or simulation, rather than genuine struggles between opposing forces.
Which all raises a really important, maybe difficult question for you listening right now. If our reality is increasingly a simulation, If the signs of the real are our only guides, how do we even begin to cultivate genuine experience or real connection beyond this orbital recurrence of models he describes?
Yeah, what responsibility do you have in navigating this hyper-real landscape?
Oh,
And maybe more fundamentally, what, if anything, remains authentically yours in a world where seemingly everything is already reproduced?
it's a lot to think about.
It really is. Thank you for diving deeper with us today into Baudrillard. Until next time, keep asking those big questions.